So sad. Hi, my special ones. Always good to be here with you. So there's something that's happened to me a lot in the entire span of my career, and this is something that really infuriates me. So you all know my name is Sylvia Oluchi, and that's what the acronym SO stands for. So a lot of times if people want to spell my name, they would write SLYVIA, which is Slyvia, or some would write SYLVA, which is Silva. My name is spelled SYLVIA, Sylvia. And I used to always get really annoyed why do people make these seemingly reckless and cheap mistakes, if I may. Because if you just come on social media, you will see how I actually spell my name. Or if you even went to Google and typed in your Slyvia spelling, Google would say, did you mean to check and give you the correct spelling of Sylvia? Like, these things seem to be no-brainers. Now, for the people who spell my Oluchi, O-L-U-C-H-I, I don't mind, because that's like the common spelling of Oluchi, even though I stylize mine to O-L-U-C-H-Y, just to make sure I always get my name on all social media handles. It's the people who spell the Sylvia wrong that really get into my skin. Because I'm like, why would you even make a mistake so simple? Or you could even just call me and ask me, yo, how do you spell your name? You know what I mean? And so when people write to me, ask me questions, or ask me for something, and I see these wrong spelling, I tend not to respond at all. Or if it's a job, I maybe call the producer and I pick on it and be like, why would you even do that? You know what I mean? I always like make sure I clear that out. But when I grew up a bit more and started practicing empathy, I think I kind of understand, not that I'm excusing it, but we're practicing empathy here. I think I kind of understand why people make these seemingly reckless and so obviously simple mistakes. And I think the problem comes in being so sure we know what we know. Now, what I mean by this is a lot of times there are some things that we've heard all our lives, or something we've just assumed, or you just saw once, and you just accept that as truth. You never ever question it, which is why most schools of psychology always advise us to periodically go back and reassess and question everything that we think we know, especially with things that are very simple and mundane, because the simpler it is, that is really where those mistakes hide. Because it's so simple or so obvious, you can't just take it for granted that I know that. You never question it, you never go back to update your knowledge of it, and then you just keep on repeating those mistakes over and over again. So I feel like people who are spelling my name Slyvia probably just one day spelt it that way and just are assuming that's the correct spelling of Sylvia. And yes, they could check to get the correct spelling, but because in their hearts they are telling themselves they know the spelling, that's why they're not even bothering to question what they think they know. Now, I find that questioning your knowledge is very easy for people who are naturally humble, people who have no problem admitting they don't know what they don't know and asking questions. The problem usually comes to people who feel they are veterans or masters, or people who feel they've been doing something for so long. You know, those ones that will tell you, I've been doing this for 20 years, or people who just kind of feel like they're so smart. Now, people like this are the most gullible to these kind of simple mistakes, because they are so sure they know it that they're never going to spend even a second to just Google it and cross-check. Which, another thing that made this very obvious to me are these memes you see where they go, I was today years old when da. And it's usually something extremely simple. But then you see it and you go, oh my God, wow, I never knew that. I'll give you an example. I saw one a few years ago that said, I was today years old when I found out that Sellotape is actually the brand name, and the product itself is a clear adhesive tape. I didn't know that. Since I was a kid, everybody calls Sellotape. It's one of those things you take for granted, and you actually go about saying, give me Sellotape. And even if they give you a different brand, you collect it and be like, I bought Sellotape. But Sellotape is like the brand name. It's like Omo. What Omo is a detergent, you know. So it's one of those, and there's so many of these I was today years old memes, and whenever you see them, you always surprised at why you never knew something so simple and so obvious. This is the reason. The reason is because you never thought to question it, because you are so sure, you have assumed that you know it and you've never ever bothered to check it out. So that's why many philosophers always advise that, like software, we should update regularly, especially with simple and mundane things. Those things that you take for granted, it could be as simple as the spelling of receive. Once in a while, go to the dictionary and check it. Check also the meaning. You might find that either you're getting the spelling wrong or you're using it in a wrong context. And this happens with so many other things. I'll give you another example. The saying, cleanliness is next to godliness. I recently found that it is not even in the Bible. It's not a biblical quote. It was first said by somebody called John Wesley. And yes, he was a preacher, but it's not a biblical quote. It was just something he said to teach people about hygiene. Now, while the message is true, a lot of us assume it's in the Bible. And because we're so sure that we know what we know, we've never ever gone back to check and say, is this thing really in the Bible? So that's the danger of sometimes assuming with knowledge, because knowledge is always changing and you can never really know it all. So it's always very important to go back, to check, to make sure. You know, I hear people throw out so many phrases, touche, or some other things, although, you know, heated though, and sometimes they're using it all wrong. But because they're just so sure, I mean, it's just the word. Of course, I know how to use, I can speak English. They've never ever bothered to question it. So the crux of my soul says today is question everything, especially those things you are so sure that you know. In fact, the more certain you are that you know something, the more you should go back periodically and check to make sure that you actually know what you know. And to wrap up, my soul says, I'll leave you with the words of the popular Greek philosopher when he says, his name is Socrates, when he said, the only thing I know for sure is that I know nothing. Thank you so much, my special ones, for watching. I always appreciate you. Always remember to practice your empathy. And empathy means what you don't want someone to do to you, don't do it to another person. And always remember that I love you.